Down the road, possibly one in the car. I'll be needing some assistance. What's the ETA on fire and ambulance?
It goes to help the driver of the truck.
10 Alma Fire Department advises ETA 5 minutes, ambulance
There's the driver.
5 to 7 minutes.
Officer pulls up that dash cam.
2210-4, advise ambulance and EMS to expedite. I'll be able to.
So he's got ammonia leaking out of this nurse tank. He grabs his little first aid bag, runs up, gets to the guy. And the thing I want to point out here is what is one of the offensive actions we have at our disposal in the FRO setting? Rescue, right? And so rescue, even if it looks that simple, like, hey, I'm just going to go get him and pull him out of this flag, that's why we're reviewing HazMat, because it often deals with stuff that can put you on the ground before you even have the chance to come out. And so what equipment do we have to protect us in a scenario? If we rolled up on this exact scenario, what equipment is available to us to protect us?
SCBA.
Right. You think in SCBA and turnouts you could go get that guy out of an ammonia cloud?
Yeah.
Just a little reference for ammonia for you guys, and I apologize if some of you already heard this, but I went to an ammonia class, and they put a whole truck company of Sacramento Metro firefighters into a tent, and they blew ammonia into the tent, and the guys were just wearing turnouts in SCBA, and they had this high-powered gun that just sat there and dumped ammonia into the tent, and it got as high as he could get the concentration and confined in this big like tarp tent, and the guys reported nothing. They said, we don't feel anything. And it was to show you that, and especially in an outdoor setting, like ammonia is not going to reach out and get you because you're only wearing turnouts. You know, ammonia is one of these things that calls for level A when you do your PPE research. But even in a tent confined with this stuff blowing directly into the tent, these guys reported nothing, no irritation in their armpits, because that's the thought behind is that it kind of goes after those moist areas. And they didn't experience any of that. So keep that in mind. We do have, when we're talking about a short-term limited exposure to most of these chemicals where we're going to be performing this rescue, an SCBA and turnouts can provide some decent protection. Let's just move right into the PowerPoint. So obviously we're reviewing FRO. Are you guys aware that there's a level below FRO called FRO? Everybody heard of that? It's basically those workers that are at the plant that have this training that helps them recognize when it's time to call for help. And then FRO is us. We're the ones that come in. I know on this shift we've got Dave and Andy that are techs, but a bulk of the lives being protected, the property being protected, a lot of that stuff lives in the FRO world, right? It's that first on scene, those first couple engines on scene, the decisions they make, that initial perimeter they set, the evacuations they call for, the rescues they make. That's where a majority of the good that we do on HazMat takes place. So just because we're FRO doesn't mean we're not going to have a significant impact on a HazMat call. By no means should we pull up to a HazMat and go, oh, this is a HazMat. Call the HazMat, we're done. You guys, let's just stay back here. There's still room to have an effect. The only other thing I want to point on this slide is that a tech is labeled here as identify product as hazards and mitigate and stabilize the incidents. A lot of times people think, oh, we got to get some specialists here so we can make an entry. But in reality, specialists are more trained to provide some support to those HazMat techs. They're the guys that you want doing the tech ref, figuring out which PPE is correct, what the appropriate decon measures are, and then also the guys that are going to start breaking unknowns down for sample identification. I like to treat this mnemonic device in the same way we use like DCAP BTLS. Is everybody familiar with that? Common thing. So that is an acronym that helps your mind run down this checklist and prompt your mind on what to do next when you're dealing with a person who's suffered traumatic injury, right? And it's great. We use these in a lot of different practices in our industry, and that's how we need to look at this SIN, CIA, PCP, DDD. Obviously it's a lot longer, but there's a lot more moving parts to a HazMat. And so as we go through this PowerPoint, we're going to break down what each one of these words means and how it's supposed to direct our thought and how we can make use of it rather than just being an acronym that we know exists in the HazMat world. So safety, we say this before we do just about anything, you know, when you're doing even from your EMS assessments, it's scene safety and then BSI. And we throw this out always in front of everything we do. Was the scene safe? Is it safe? What's the number one responsibility? Our safety. So what are some things, including what's on this slide, but what are some safety things we can do before a call in the world of HazMat, FRO response to HazMat? Give me an example.
Knowing local hazards, target hazards.
Huge, especially in this area, right? We don't have that many. We could be extremely familiar with every HazMat target hazard we have in this district, and it wouldn't even take a month. What about on here how it says monitors? What are we talking about when we say before the call monitors? Whether it's maintaining or staying familiar with. How do we maintain our monitors?
You should have calibrated appropriately.
Right. They tell us when they're not calibrated, right? And then what about staying familiar with them? We're going to work on that this afternoon, but do you guys, during your weeklies, do you turn them on, make sure you check them out, make sure you know how they're working? One thing I will say, we had a gas leak, and my monitor, I could smell the gas. It's rich all around me. My monitor was giving me like a 3 or 4% LEL reading. And the gas company shows up, and the guy's standing in the same spot right next to me, and his monitor's pegging out. And so I realized that my monitor was not working. So just because we have these awesome monitors, and we do a pretty good job of keeping them calibrated, you can't just rely on that exclusively. One of the benefits we have is each rig has a monitor on it. And so if you have another rig on scene, make sure you bring their monitor in to confirm what you're getting. Because in that scenario, I wasn't getting the reading. That would have definitely been a trigger point for our decision making. How do we maintain our PPE? This is something Rod helps us do every year.
Fit test?
Fit test, exactly. That mask fit test, that's going to be the most important component to you making a HazMat rescue, right? Keeping that stuff out of your airway. And then staying familiar with your reference material. I know we talked about ERG already, but, and I didn't even pass ERGs out this year because where does all this stuff live now? What do we do for reference? Every one of us, it's a phone, right? We don't need the books. It's great to have them, and maybe you do need them. Maybe we don't have reception. Know where they are in your rigs. But when you're going en route to a potential HazMat call, that guy in the back seat can be sitting here. There's an ERG app. There's a Wiser app. Do you guys all familiar with Wiser? Very simple, easy to use app. Wiser will connect you with ERG. It'll connect you with NIOSH. It'll give you all that research information you need to start to help make informed decisions as you're rolling down the road. Okay, responding. So this is a big, probably one of the most valuable areas for us to just be aware of and start turning the wheels on. If a call comes out dispatched, like you said, at one of our target HazMat facilities, and it's a medical call, there's no clues whatsoever that's a HazMat. That's where we need to start implementing this FRO mentality. Okay, wait a second, I'm going to a difficulty breathing at the sanitary district. Well, the sanitary district has some weird chemicals there. You don't even have to remember what they have there. But I know that they do have some HazMat there. Maybe that's a great red flag alert from you as the FRO responder to reach back to dispatch, go, hey, can you give me some more information on this? Is this person injured because of something on site? Maybe we're going to Westmont for an injured subject, and that injured subject is someone that is tripped in a stairwell while carrying acid up to the chemistry lab. It's digging into the information based on the location, and then just recognizing clues. Anytime I hear multiple patients with the same symptoms, that's a red flag for me for HazMat, because it just doesn't happen very often, right? Sometimes you'll run into that with like a fentanyl overdose at a party or whatnot, but other than the drug overdose, I can't really think of why multiple people would have the same symptoms unless it's some sort of exposure to something potentially a HazMat. And then as you're going down the road, we're all pretty good about this because it's an important component to a lot of things we do, but check out your wind direction and then adjust your response route as necessary. If you know you're going to the sanitary district and we have our prevailing wind that blows off the ocean over the land, sort of, if you were to say coming from the mesa this direction, that general angle, then maybe we're going to go around and access the sanitary district from channel versus accessing off of Monte Cristo. Might give us that upwind approach. Jumping right into response routes. Why is it important to be uphill?
If it's liquid.
Right. If it's liquid, if it's on fire, where's our runoff going to go? It's going to come right back at us if we're below it. So you want to be upwind, uphill, upstream. Another thing on hazmats that's kind of key is don't park where you can smell the product, right? Don't park when you're downwind of it. Regardless of the call, if you smell it, move your engine. If you can, position for rapid egress, back in. We don't, especially if we really don't know what's going on and maybe there's a risk of some sort of flammability concern or, any unknown. Position yourself for quick escape. I don't know if you guys ever seen the video of the dash cam on a police car where he's pulling up to a call at night and he's driving in and it starts to light off and he's just in reverse flying and the screen just this levy action keeps happening in his dash cam that fills the entire screen. So sometimes you got to get out in a hurry. And unfortunately, engines can't back like a police car. Okay, let's move to on scene. So we get on scene, now we're thinking safety. What's the biggest thing we can do in regards to keeping ourselves safe on a potential hazmat? Seeing that big picture, right?
Yeah, trying to identify what's going on.
Not looking through the straw at the problem, making sure you're taking everything into account. There may be somebody laying right there at that door and it's like, okay, we have a patient, we have a victim, we need to go do a rescue, but maybe backing up, maybe there's some detonated device has gone off and now we're putting ourselves at risk. You really have to be able to define that problem accurately and quickly as best possible. And then that allows us to make the proper risk management, right? The risk a lot to save a lot concept comes into play. Has this person been down for an unknown amount of time inside of a building where there was a chlorine leak all night long? Did someone watch them go down? The viability of it being a rescue or a recovery, and then basing that determination, are we going to put somebody at risk to go in and get them, or are we going to slow down and make sure we get all the information we need before moving in? And then if you are going down to a call and somebody has, and maybe the call has all the appropriate stuff in dispatch to indicate that it is a hazmat, that's a good time for you to look back to the guy in the back and say, hey, start putting your turnouts on. If we're in 92, maybe get your breather on. When we get there, if we can effect a rescue, I don't want you to be that police officer who's moth to the flame and runs in and grabs the guy. Make sure your firefighter or you or your engineer are prepared to make that rescue in the regard that you have the right PPE on. Sometimes you get to a scene and people start running out to you screaming and asking for help, and putting on your SCBA and doing stuff we do all the time becomes a lot more difficult. Okay, public, obviously, once we get on scene, one of the big ways we can keep them safe is rescuing them from the product, but what's more important than that, and often more common, what's our role? This protective actions piece, right? Is everybody comfortable with what protective actions means? What are the two protective actions that we deal with 99% of the time?
Shelter in place.
Evacuation, shelter in place. And it doesn't need to be exclusive either. We'll look at a slide here and we'll be able to see that sometimes you can have that be sort of up to them. If you can get out, get out. If you're already in the product, close your windows, close your doors, isolate, because the last thing you want to do is tell people they got to evacuate and now they're exposed to whatever's blowing through their neighborhood. Okay, so we've got on scene, we've safely positioned our rig, we're upwind, we're uphill. We've decided that there's, there either was a rescue or there wasn't, but that component's over. We've moved into notifying dispatch on who we need to evacuate or shelter in place. And now we're going to work on creating that initial perimeter. So let's use Dave's example of the leak, the chlorine leak at a chem building at UCSB. The chlorine leak was detected from an alarm, I believe, not a person. It was a chlorine alarm in the building. And so in that regard, you could pull up in your ERG and see what the leak or the minimum evacuation distance is for chlorine. And it might give you 300 feet, depending on, if you're looking at a small spill. But in reality, how are you going to create your initial perimeter for that call?
Get it.
Just isolate the building, right? We're going to make sure the building's empty and that nobody else is going in. What's that assignment called? It's right here. Site access control. This is a great assignment for that first in crew. The first in captain, what's he going to be? IC, right? He can turn to his engineer and firefighter and go, hey guys, you're going to be my site access control. Make sure the building is empty, time with that RP, and then take the monitor and do some readings around the building to make sure that it is isolated, this building. We don't have chlorine built into our monitor, do we? You may not be able to get it just off the oxygen sensor, so that monitor may be useless, but maybe somebody on scene does have a monitor. And then the other thing in here is secure the scene and enforce perimeter, preserve evidence. Hazmats can often take a turn into the world of where people are liable, and what that scene looked like initially may be only available to that FRO response. And so you could play a huge part in helping paint the picture for the investigators, and then eventually maybe lawyers in a court setting. Just to reiterate, yeah, your ERG is a great source of information for those first few minutes, but use common sense as well. Law enforcement is great for that initial perimeter. How do we typically identify our initial perimeter, especially on gas leaks? What's the tool that us firefighters use to identify our initial perimeter? The caution tape, right? That's our perimeter. We'll wrap it around a tree, wrap it around a fence, and we'll create our initial perimeter, and then we can make sure nobody goes under that caution tape until they do, and they walk their kids to school. How do we confirm that that perimeter is right? Obviously, we've got our ERG, we've got common sense, we've got the wind direction, but what's a tool that we do have to, especially with methane, how can we confirm whether or not perimeter is right? You can smell it, for sure. Monitor. We have a monitor that will take care of that. And that's a great way to do it, especially if you're talking about evacuating houses or sheltering in place. We had a leak on East Valley and corner of East Valley and a driveway. And there's a home immediately adjacent to it, another one across the way. The wind was kind of blowing towards the home. I took the monitor up and I went to the person's house and there was no reading there. So I advised them, hey, we have a gas leak here, you can shelter in place. Had I gone into their house and gotten a reading on the monitor, it would have clued me in, hey, you know what, we're gonna have you leave the house until we can secure the gas leak and clear the air in your house. So monitors are very important when it comes to creating that initial perimeter. And then what else can we do right when we get on scene as far as isolating this problem? We can contain it, right? Maybe there's a defensive measure we can take to contain it. What are some of the tools we have in the realm of containing as a FRO? There's some keywords out there. Damming, diking, diverting, covering a storm drain. Maybe it wants to settle at a low part of the freeway and the only thing there is a storm drain. Cover that storm drain with a salvage cover, throw some dirt on top to hold it down. Now whatever that product is will settle in that low spot and it just becomes a cleanup issue. It's the same mentality as what's the best way to make a rescue on a fire? Put the fire out, right? So if we can contain it and keep it from spreading right off the bat, that's gonna help our initial isolation, our initial perimeter, and our people's safety. We talked about this, right? These are some of the things that we can detect. This flammable CO, that's another hazmat that we go on regularly, right? As FROs. H2S, VOC, and then what's the other one? We have a sixth sensor that we often detect. It's right here.
Oxygen.
No, that's right, we have two more, oxygen and HCN. We'll talk later when we break out for why those are important. Notifications, when we're going down this SIN list, notifications, the ones I want to reinforce in this class for the FRO level, are more exactly what Captain Skay was talking about. Gas company. Let's get gas company coming. They're going to be the ones that are going to solve this problem. Let's get the hazmat started. That's a notification. They're going to be the team that goes in and stops the leak. Let's get law enforcement started to help with sheltering in place or evacuation, or perhaps just contact county to send that call back down the line. Getting a responsible party, especially reliable, whether it's the owner of the business, the lead safety person at Westmont for their lab, getting them on the phone, reaching out to dispatch and saying, hey, can you get me an RP for this? Or is there an RP on scene? That's a great notification like we had already talked about. That person's gonna be very instrumental in the decisions we make and the success of the call. And then, as we all know, if it's adjacent to a hotel, have dispatch call the hotel. Maybe have second in, go in through the lobby. Hey, you go to the front of the Miramar, let them know we got this going on in the train tracks behind the hotel. They can shelter in place, everything in the front, but the stuff on the beach needs to evacuate, whatever. Make sure those adjacent properties, especially hotels, schools, and assisted living facilities, are notified early on. And there's a test question here. Pesticide release. Initially, I thought this was kind of a lame test question that was just for the test, but the more I think about the carp component, we are near significant amount of agriculture and carp, and who knows, if nothing else, those pesticide carrying trailers or trucks are on the freeway, and they may even be on East Valley for all we know, or 192. So if you do get something like that, that's a county agriculture notification, and you'll see that on the test. And then oil spill, we do have a pretty active oil coastline here, and just something to keep in mind, and it is on the test, is the entity that ends up having the final say in that is Department of Fish and Game, but I'm pretty sure Coast Guard's involved as well, so just remember that for the test. And then this last thing, this National Contingency Plan, apparently this is a publication that will tell you which federal agency assistance is available for hazmats in your area. Keep that in mind when we get into the test. This is that level of notification is stuff that's going on a little farther down the line, right? It's not so much in that FRO world anymore. This is when it's become a major thing, and now the county's reaching out to the state, who's reaching out to the federal, and saying, okay, are we getting the 9th Civil Support Team to come assist on this? Is this a Coast Guard assistance call? Those are those lofty notifications that I'm not so worried about. We sort of review and reinforce here at the FRO level, but they did make their way into the test. Okay, getting into command as a C in our acronym, it's not really that different from command on any other call, right? Command on a hazmat is just command on a call with a problem that needs to be solved. The big difference here is that you have a lot more resources involved typically. But it could be as simple as that gas leak call, right? You're getting on scene. We do a great job with Blue Card in standardizing our radio traffic for first on scene and Blue Card. But when it's a call that isn't a structure fire and it isn't something we cover in Blue Card, one thing that helps me, and take it or leave it, adapt it to however you see fit, but it's this concept of the 5 W's for that initial radio traffic. It just gives it a real simple approach, right? Who are you? Engine 91, where are you? I'm on scene, Eucalyptus and the railroad crossing. What do you have? I have a stopped train with a product leaking out of it and a yellow gas emanating from the product. This will be the Eucalyptus incident. Engine 91 has command. We're going to isolate 1,000 feet in every direction. Dispatch, I need you to start a hazmat and 5 additional engines. I need you to reach out to the Miramar and advise them they need to shelter in place. And I need you to contact law enforcement and have them start evacuating the Miramar Beach condos and all addresses on Miramar Avenue, or whatever that little side street is that runs parallel to the tracks there. If you think of the 5 W's, it makes it real simple. It gets the basic stuff out in the beginning, and then it gives you a place to say what you've got. You're taking command, you can build that in right then. What are you gonna do, and then what do you need? Not sometimes, but on a hazmat call, sometimes there's so many moving pieces that the first in person can get overwhelmed on what to address first in that radio traffic. And it can come down to, I've been on calls where there was too much going on, and one of the spinning moves that I made was I started talking about what the command and TAC was to incoming units instead of saying, hey, when you get here, I need you to do this. My mind was trying to get to so many different places that I really just needed to settle in and think about my 5 W's and deliver the important information. Okay, now you're on scene, you've given your first in radio traffic, and now your mind needs to start going down this mental checklist, whether you're using SIN, CIA, PCP, whatever it is. Start considering these things, and how are you going to assign resources to address each one of these problems or potential problems. Is your crew going to do rescue? Is another engine going to do rescue? Is a squad going to do rescue? Do you need law enforcement to handle evacuation? How are you going to isolate and deny entry? You're going to use your crew to make sure everybody's out and then put up some caution tape? You work your way down a list like this, or you keep familiar with, when I get on a hazmat, these are the things I need to consider. If I did have a patient, this is a huge piece of the puzzle. Emergency decon. I had a call once where a guy was exposed to a large amount of acid, and we showed up and he was drenched in water, head to toe. He was soaking wet, his clothes were wet. We thought, this is great. They already deconned him. They'd put him in one of those emergency showers, they'd had him shower off, they had his shirt off, he just had his jeans on. We load him up on the gurney, walks over. We're first in. The hazmat response hadn't even started yet. We were just doing patient care. There's one engine on the scene of an injured subject, and it was at this big facility that should have registered as a potential hazmat, but it didn't. And so we get there, and the guy walks over to the gurney, gets on. You can tell he's shaking and he's experiencing some discomfort, but he looks to be relatively fine. Loads in the ambulance, goes to the hospital. Some time goes by, we're starting to set up the hazmat component to this call, and we look, and where his water footsteps had been to the gurney are now dry, and the concrete is etched with acid. He'd still had acid running off him like crazy. And so we had taken for granted that this guy was decon, because they'd said they'd rinsed him in the shower and he looked wet, and it was great. But in reality, he had still had acid all over him. It was still running off onto the concrete. And so how can we, especially with a corrosive nature call, how can we as a first in FRO engine confirm that that guy is deconned? What tools available to us on our rigs? What'd you say?
pH strip.
pH strip, right? That's super easy, especially with somebody that's wet. Just go up and put it on them. Make sure you got your box. Look, check, is he neutral? Is he neutral? Is he not? We'll review some pH strip stuff today, but one of the big things, I'll reinforce it right now as well, is make sure you have that box. Our pH strips are those kind that have the multiple different colors. Without that box to decode it, you may not even know if they've changed colors or not. And then safe refuge area. Is everybody comfortable with what that means? Why would what a safe refuge area even is? Anybody give me an example of what is
affected by that? It could be a room that's just isolated from the incident.
What? And then, well, I'll just go right into it. So let's say we go to some sort of release at the Miramar, and it's in a banquet hall, and there's 100 people in that banquet hall, and this release potentially is exposed to all 100 people. Well, we need a place to put those people. They can't stay in that room because now that's the hot zone. We can't put them in the cold zone because they could be contaminated. So we got to find this safe refuge area that's in what we consider the warm zone or the contamination reduction zone to collect these people and to assess them and then to figure out if they are contaminated or not. So a safe refuge area is a total FRO function. Hey, everybody out. I can't have you go out to the front of the building yet. Let's move you into the back courtyard here. We'll keep you here. Somebody's going to come over and talk to you. Defensive containment could just be as simple as closing the doors to that ballroom and shutting off the HVAC for the building, evacuating the rest of that front lobby. Fire control. This is often something we got to deal with on hazmat calls. A lot of hazmat materials result in fire. How are you going to assign that? That in itself can suck up a ton of resources. So we have to start thinking, how many rigs do I need? Is it better for me just to start a structure response until I figure this thing out? That way I know I've got 4 engines, a truck, and a squad, and a couple BCs heading my direction. And then these hazmats can often turn into MCIs, right? And how do you treat an MCI? What's this 3 words right here will help you get your ball rolling on any MCI. Triage, treatment, transport. And then the last thing I came up with was that response route for those incoming units. Is there a train blocking their access? Is there a plume blowing in the direction that they're approaching? Make sure that you've got a safe access for those incoming units.